How you guys doing today? We have a special guest, Mr. Jacob Hamilton. He got into real estate when he was 18 years old. And today, just barely over 21, he's done over 70 transactions with a realtor. He just started his own Compass real estate office in Old Town Alexandria. He sold 70 units of property this year. He's flipping properties. He's building properties. He's holding properties. He's mature beyond his years. And he literally just went out last week and bought a Porsche. And guys, he's done all of that in less than 38 months. And he turned 21 3 months ago. Jacob Hamilton, you won't want to miss this. Jacob, welcome to the show, man.
I'm on
Thank you for having me.
Your story is absolutely outstanding. I'm proud to know you. I think in 5 years, I think in 5 years, like everybody in the DMV who's in the real estate community will know the name Jacob Hamilton. I'm very confident of that. Tell us how it all began. I mean, you literally said you studied the real estate exam in your chemistry class in high school.
Yeah, so I mean, I actually, when my real estate career probably stretches back like almost 10 years, because when I was 11 or 12, I was doing what most middle school age kids do to get money, which was, cutting grass. I had a lemonade stand, the whole shebang on that type of stuff. But I was cutting grass for a local landlord, and he asked me to cut lawns for, it was like 10 or 11 properties in this one square block. And I was like, why do you own all these houses? Do you live in like one house for, every day of the week or something? And he was like, no, I rent them out and they pay me rent. And he like literally walked me through how real estate investment worked at like 11 or 12 years old. And I was like completely mind blown. I was like, they just pay you $2,000 to live there? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, and how much are you paying me to cut the grass? And he was like, $10. So I don't know, I guess it kind of sparked a light bulb for me. And then as I grew up and as I matured, I started to take more of an interest in it. Like when I was 15, I worked at Remax. I passed out flyers. I danced around in a house costume on the weekends for money, and was just kind of always around the business in one way or another. And then later on in high school, like my junior year of high school, I worked at a commercial real estate tax savings firm as like a cost segregation salesperson. So I would reach out to property owners and speak to them about how we might be able to help you, save money on your taxes. And then, as soon as I turned 18, maybe it was 5 or 6 weeks after my 18th birthday, I ended up getting my real estate license after working at Keller Williams as an ISA for about 5 months. So after I got my license, I joined a team at that office at Keller Williams and, was kind of off to the races from there. My first year I did, was it 24 units. And then the year after that, it was like 38. And then this year is going to be just about 70.
Wow. That's incredible. Now, I know on YouTube, there's a lot of young people and just in the YouTube audience in general. I'm sure a lot of people are going to watch this and they're going to find this very, very inspirational. I remember when I was younger, before getting into real estate investing, I thought about potentially getting my real estate license. But the one thing that was always holding me back was I was thinking, even if I got my license, who is going to trust an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old to go sell their house, their most important asset? So can you tell me this? How the hell did you do that? How did you convince the first person to sell their house to you? And was it difficult to get those first few people selling? Did people know how old you were? Or?
It really was. And you know what it came down to? For like lack of a better term, it just came down to me just like knowing my shit. Like I would, I was always the first person at the office and the last one to leave. And before I got there, I would just study the market. I'd look at the hot sheets. I'd look at what came on the market, what came off, what went pending, what didn't, previewing property. Like I was just like in the market. And, you know, I kind of point that to like my team leader at the time, Chris Fraser, who's still a really good friend of mine. He told me, he was just like, look, you need to understand the market. If you know the market, people will trust you. And then after I kind of like made a routine of like, okay, I need to educate myself within the market, which is looking at the hot sheets on the MLS, going and previewing property and just kind of, you know, measuring where things are going and whatnot, and being able to create my own opinion of what's happening in the market. I kind of like moved my, like, you know, you always have to be learning something. So I moved my, what I was like, once I guess mastered that skill set or mastered that routine of educating myself on the market, I was like, all right, what else can I learn that can be, you know, what's something I can learn that I can teach my clients next? And that kind of what's helped me get into like the construction space. Cause I was like always asking my contractor who was doing work or whatever for one of my listings or whatever it was. I was like, okay, so you're going to do this and you're going to charge my client $3,000. How much is it going to cost you to do it? Because you're going to have two guys here. And I started to understand how that contracting side of things works. So I would teach my clients, I'd be like, guys, so like, here's how you get a good price with contractors. A lot of contractors really don't like me for exposing, but you know, that, and I had a lot of experience with, you know, my job in high school as working in cost segregation.
Yeah.
So educating my investor clients on stuff like that. I just became like a completely invaluable tool to my clients throughout their either them buying their first home, investing in a property, or selling their property, whatever it was. I just immersed myself and educated myself on everything that I possibly could to bring value, to kind of, you know, handle the objection of like, oh, well, we're talking to John, who's been in the business for 50 years. He's done this 2,000 times and you've done it twice.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that. I love it when people that are younger could just put in the extra work like you did, you know, to just really show that, hey, my age doesn't matter. What matters is what I can do for you. So let me show you. So I guess the real thing you did is you just showed people exactly what you could do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, when I was on the real estate team, I was like, you know, I was just an agent there. And I, you know, I'd call expireds, or I would call for sale by owners or absentee owners, whomever it was, people in foreclosure, whatever. And I was quickly like, even when I was working with a buyer, like if my team leader gave me a Zillow lead, I would, if it was just like a $250,000 or $175,000 condo that I was going to go show this person, I would go all out. I would bring all the market data, be like, here's why it's priced this way. Here's how much it's going to cost for you to fix it, all this stuff. And people would show up and they'd be like, wow, I've gone on like 5 other showings with other agents from Redfin or Zillow, and nobody's ever like explained it to me in this manner. So that's how I got a lot of my first like buyer clients. Like I would just kind of show that I'm educated so that I know what I'm talking about. And then for like the seller side of things, you know, it's just a lot of grinding. Like, you know, you get a lot of no's because there's you know, the listing side of the business is far more competitive than the buying side of the business.
Right.
So like going after the listings, I was just kind of like, you know, really having to, you know, pound the pavement and get bloody knuckles and get, you know, grind to get listings.
Now you list some of Josh's properties, don't you?
I think I've sold every single one of Josh's projects in the past year, unless there's a couple that I don't know about. Maybe there's 1 or 2.
And he sells them all for premium. It's pretty phenomenal.
Really? You gotta tell us that story, Josh. How did you meet Jacob, and what were your thoughts? What were your thoughts when this like young 19 or 20-year-old was like, I want to sell your houses for you? Like, tell us that story. There's gotta be an interesting story there.
You know, I'm trying to remember, Jacob, how that actually happened.
I remember. So I when I had first gotten into the business, I was calling like absentee owners, and I stumbled upon this guy who is he's a friend of mine and a client to this day. He owns, I don't know, 25 or 30 rentals in the area. And I called him, I was like, hey, would you be interested in selling your property in Arlington? He was like, no, but I would be interested in selling this one. So I did like a big CMA, and we just stayed in touch. He ended up selling that one with me and a couple others, but we've done a ton of deals since. But anyways, this guy buys properties at like stupid deals. He knows attorneys. He's just been in the business for 50 years. Everybody knows him. Every, you know, real estate attorney, every probate attorney. So he bought this house in Alexandria for like $200,000, and it's worth like $600,000 now. And anyways, he was like, yeah, I want to sell this, Jake. Call some of your investors and see what they'll give. They'll, you know, buy it for me for. So I like reached out to Josh. I think it was on Facebook, and I was like, hey, I have this deal like $375,000. I could sell it for like at the time like $565,000 or something like that. And Josh was like, all right, we'll go take a look at it. And we went and took a look at it, and we just kind of like got to talking. He had just hired an agent who had like royally screwed up one of his listings. So I kind of gave him an idea. I was like, well, I probably would have done this a little bit different. I would have done X, Y, and Z a little bit differently. Did your agent not bring that up? And he had already like hired somebody new that was putting it on the market, but I was just giving him my 2 cents on what I would have done. So I guess kind of from there, the relationship kind of flourished, because I would call him. I'd be like, hey, I have a deal here. Check this out. Or, you know, when he would have a project, he'd be like, hey, what do you think of this? We're about to put an offer on it. Like, what do you think you could sell it for? That type of stuff. And, you know, it became like that type of that's how most like builder relationships start. I know for a lot of the projects that Josh is thinking of doing, like in Falls Church or wherever else in the Northern Virginia area, if he's actually thinking of purchasing it himself and doing the construction and all that good stuff, I usually get a phone call or something, and we kind of walk through the numbers together and see if it makes sense. Because if I'm telling him, like, hey, Josh, I could totally sell it for $1 million, and then 3 months later when it's done, I don't come through, then it's like, you know.
Reputation shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, it was just, you know, it was kind of coincidental, I guess, but, you know, purposeful at the same time.
Yeah.
I remember thinking Robert, because I think he was like 19 at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this kid is like the Doogie Howser of real estate. And he's chatting with me on Facebook. I'm like, I don't know whether to take it seriously or not. But then Jacob is really good. Jacob's like the doctor of real estate. Like, he diagnoses exactly what the problem is before prescribing the solution. So like, he's not going to tell you like, just list with me. He's going to be like, Robert, did you do this, and this? Like, this is what you should have done. This is what you should have tried. This is the path forward. So I'm like, man, this kid is really impressive. And
a lot of that came from like, you know, me being successful with working with investors really ties into like some of my first listings. Because like a lot of my first listings were listed by like 3. I had one that was listed by 7 agents before me.
Oh my God.
I came in, and Josh remembers this property. It was in Falls Church. It was on Barrett Road.
Impossible to sell that.
It was literally, you call any agent that's ever sold a house in Falls Church, like, hey, have you heard of the Impossible House? And they're like, yeah, the one that sold like 2 years ago. And like, I don't know how I sold it, quite honestly, but like, because I remember the house was it was a new construction home.
Yeah.
The builder had built it for himself, and it had just the most unfunctional floor plan of any home. There was a hot tub surrounded by glass in the middle of the first floor. You could see into the hot tub from the kitchen. It was so stupid. It was crazy. But
and it was in a floodplain too.
And it was in a floodplain. It was crazy. But like, you know, I worked my tail off for like 4 months and ended up selling it because I was like, all right, well, the floor plan only makes sense for like a multi-generational family. And I was like confused the whole time of the listing, like, how should I sell this? How should I sell this? So I started reaching out to like Asian real estate agents because they have in that, you know, demographic, typically multi-generational type people. And I like kind of struck gold. I called this guy up and I was like, hey, so I have this listing. I don't know if you've seen it. You may have. I know you work in this price point pretty frequently, so I figure you might know somebody. But I know you're obviously doing a lot of business, so you may not have seen it on the MLS. And I described it to him. And he was like, that would be perfect for, I have a client who hosts a radio show and his entire family is coming in from Korea. So like this radio host buys this house, and like I remember going up and I show it to them and I'm like talking about all the features and selling it and all this, you know, all this good stuff. And this guy has like a posse with him. It was pretty funny, but you know, that was like one of those things where it's like, all right, you got to really think outside of the box of like how to sell this. Or like I was working with a builder who was trying to sell one of his properties in Pemmon Hills by himself, for sale by owner. And I came over, I took the listing over from him. And this was at the time where Pemmon Hills was not such a hot market, like 2 years ago, where it was super overcrowded with inventory. Marion Homes was just like, I mean, it's Sneed, I think. They were just in Evergreen. It was all super crowded. There was a ton of inventory. So I was like, all right, how do we separate ourselves from Marion and from Evergreen and Sneed and all the other big builders that dominate that little neighborhood? And I was just like, look, there's people that love working with big companies because they know they have the security, but there's also people that love mom and pop builders. So I told him, I was like, Mike, look, here's the deal. Like, this needs to not be like that. Your home looks exactly like everybody else's. So, and it's the same square footage where it's not the price that's the issue, but we need to position yourself in a way in which where people get to know you on a personal level. So we're not selling the home necessarily. The home is the exact same as everybody else. We need to sell you, the builder, and why somebody should support your business and buy that home versus buying an Evergreen home.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with Evergreen
Yeah.
by any means, but like, we just needed to figure out a way to separate ourselves. So a lot of my like first listings or bigger listings or just first transactions were really hard listings to sell. Had 2 or 3 agents before me, so I had to like force myself to like think creatively and think like.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I'll give you an example of this, like even in my own life. Like I was house shopping before I moved back to Virginia recently, by the way. So I'm back in Virginia from LA, and before moving, I wanted to get out of California because the taxes were way too high.
Like everybody else.
I was looking at Texas, and my wife wanted an older, like more historic home. So we'd go and we look at this one huge, massive, like 4,000 square foot, old, like 1800s house, right outside of Austin. And she loved it because it was old. And like this couple had spent like, I think like 2 decades restoring it. It was immaculate. And then unfortunately the husband passed away and the wife was like, this is too much. So she loved it because it was old, but it had been sitting for a while because there was this huge tractor like barn right behind the house. It was so weird. It's like in this urban area and there's just like this big tractor barn. And she's like, no, there's no way. We can't buy this. It's got this big, huge tractor barn. We have to rip that whole thing down. And I'm like, hey, I would love to have that tractor barn because that would be my podcast studio. I'd put a big table there. We'd have lights, cameras. We'd fly Josh in. We'd fly guests in. Like these like quirky little things in houses that like the average agent that's not creative, maybe they're just like, oh, okay, I'm not going to sell this thing. You're going now and thinking creatively like, hey, where's this? Which demographic, which specific buyer would this be a value add instead of a value negative? And I think that's awesome. I think not a lot of people think that way, and that's probably why you're so good at investing as well, because you really need.
Well, it's like that, but it's also like the pricing side of things too. Because I mean, that builder in Falls Church with the Impossible House, he was at like 1.3, and I was like, look, it's 9:45 every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And then he was like, price it at $1,050,000. Let's see what happens. I was like, this is a mistake. Trust me, it's going to sell in the market. Yada yada yada. Everybody knows the whole spiel. Yeah. So, anyway, it sells for $947,000. So I was $2,000 off. But anyways, I like when you're pricing something like that. I realize when you're dealing with houses that are either very unique or have an issue or have something that not every buyer's going to want, and you have to kind of like understand the market really well, because you got to say like, all right, this is on a busy road. Like that's probably a 10% haircut off the price. Yeah. Or, this doesn't have a basement and it's, all the rest of the houses do. I would say that's you have to analyze the negatives and figure out exactly where it really needs to be. And it's really hard to do that. And it takes a lot of time. And most agents, quite honestly, they like do an automated CMA. They just put the address in and let the computer do the work. But if you actually dig
this estimate,
literally, like I went to a listing appointment 2 months ago for a house in Mount Vernon. Everybody was telling this lady $499, and I was like, well, actually, I told her, I was like, look, I could tell you $499 and sell you on my marketing, but like that's not what's going to hire you. You're looking at multiple agents, and quite honestly, like this is a townhome, and if we price it accordingly, you do what I'm telling you you need to do when it comes to updating the home it's going to sell. That being said, the reason you're going to hire a real estate agent is to make sure you get the most amount of money. And I said, here's how we're going to get you to 525. And I showed her the figures, and I said the market will absorb it. Where I explained my position on why I thought we should price that way, and it sold right on the money. And I don't believe that market down there was hot enough to where I could have priced it at $499 and would have been escalated to $525 with multiple offers. So that seller, they ended up making a lot more money just because I know the market versus the other agents she was speaking to did not.
Yeah. Wow. Super impressive with your knowledge.
I want to highlight a couple of things here. So, Jacob, it sounds like you got into the business with sort of going after the really tough deals and being creative. But where you're at now, I think a lot of your business today is referral based, if I'm not wrong. And
it's
the other thing
that way, yeah.
And the other thing that I've seen you do, which I think is really smart, is you work with a lot of investor clients who are repeat business for you. Is that sort of fair to say?
Yeah. So I would say about half my business is like investors and builders. And what's great is because like when I speak to a builder like Josh, like I know Josh's build costs because I ask him and because I go inside the home and I feel the quality of finish. And, you know, I know the type of deal he's looking for and I know how much money he wants to make on a deal and all that good stuff. I get to know them. I understand the business. But the other thing is I really, really understand the cost of construction for every investor because believe it or not, it really varies. Like there's some, I've got to build this building for $65 a foot. Is it a nice house? Debatable. But he's probably watching this and knows I'm talking about him. But there's some guys that build for 65 foot. I've got guys that build for 225 a foot, anywhere in between. And like, you know, I come across deals every single day. It's literally built into my calendar every single day to sit down and call people and search for deals and look for, you know, opportunities for these builders and investors. So I guess when it came to like getting repeat business from them, it was kind of understanding their business and understanding what they're looking for. Like if there's anything in West Lawn, you know, that would probably almost always, that's always going to go right to Josh if the numbers make sense for what his build cost is. So I just had to get to understand that business.
Josh owns there, yeah.
We gotta transition this conversation for a minute because Jacob's become an investor himself in the last couple of years, and I think folks want to know, like, we sort of got a feeling now how you got into real estate. How did you transition into being an investor, and when did you decide to sort of make the switch?
Yeah, so I mean, like my bread and butter is brokering transactions. I mean, like selling 70 houses a year is more than a full-time job. I mean, that's about an 80-hour work week. But it came really naturally because like here's the thing, I would go to a deal and I would be telling the investor like, hey, this is a great opportunity for you for X, Y, and Z. And then I would leave and I'd be like sitting in my car, be like, gosh, I should buy this. And
right,
you know, I was like, God, he's gonna make $200,000 and I'm gonna make 20. What? But no, it came down to that because I was like, all right, well, you know, even some of my investors, they were like, oh, I can't handle another project. I was like, let's partner on it. Like, I'll put this much money and you put the rest in. I'll handle the construction, I'll rent it out, and I'll put my name on the mortgage for the refinance, all that type of stuff. Like, I've got, how many rentals is it now? 6 or 7, and a lot of them are in partnerships. Other ones I just bought like on my own. One of them I have owner financing on, which was amazing. And then some of the other stuff that I've like gotten into have been like flips. I've done this year, I did 2 flips, and then I've got one house that I'm working with the county on right now to get through permitting. I've got another house that's actually gonna be under a roof in probably like 2 or 3 hours in Falls Church. So it's definitely grown a lot, but it's all come really naturally because like I knew the market that I wanted to invest in, and I knew the deals because after working with so many investors, you get to know a lot of people. Like Josh, for instance, will call me and he'll say, hey, I've got this deal. Do you know anybody that would buy it? And it just so happened that recently I was like, yeah, you know, the person that might want to buy it would be myself. So,
so did you buy it?
I did buy it. That's the one that's going to be under a roof in a couple of hours. So if you guys come take a look at it after.
Yeah.
But no, it becomes that because you meet so many people and like agents. Oh, I would argue I'm like within the business, you know, I know a lot of real estate agents, and a lot of real estate agents know that I work with a lot of builders. So like they'll call me if they have a deal, and if it ends up being a really good deal, like I would definitely, you know, consider myself one of the people that would be interested in purchasing it. So it's most of my like finding these deals has been like word of mouth or just maybe some cold calling or light advertising for stuff like this. But it's been, you know, for the most part, transitioning into investing was kind of always the end goal of selling real estate. Because if you sell a lot of real estate, you start piling up a lot of cash and you're like, wow, what do I do with all this? And, you know, it becomes a pretty easy answer is to, you know, start to practice what you preach.
Makes sense.
Awesome. We're getting a question from the community. How did you negotiate the owner financing on that?
It's kind of a funny story. So like for the owner financing deal, it's just like a townhouse or a duplex that I own in Huntington and Alexandria. And I called somebody up, and he's absentee owner, and I was just like, hey, how are you? Like, had you thought about selling this place? He was like, yeah, I just sold an office building I owned up the street, and it was owner financing. And I was like, okay, very interesting. Would you owner finance your property on Riverview Terrace? And he was like, yeah. I was like, how much would you want down? And he was like, I'd want to just keep he's like, I get like $1,500 a month for the mortgage, so I probably want to get a little more than that. I was like, well, that would probably calculate to like a 5% down payment. And he was like, yeah, I'd be okay with that. And I was like, okay, yeah, I could do that. Literally, like, I decided to buy a property on like a Monday morning after 20 minutes of being at the office. And it was funny because it was like I was not having a good month that month. I didn't have very many closings. So I was like, this is, I got to kind of just, I got to bite the bullet and spend all my money on this place. But it was totally worth it. It was 5% down on a place that I bought for, I think it's probably like, it was 75% of value. And it's, I raised the rent immediately. And it's, it's a rental property in Northern Virginia that cash flows $100 a month. So it's kind of crazy because there's no PMI. I got really lucky, and the guy who was selling it to me, owner financing, was just, super easy to work with. But I would like to try to figure out a way to get to, more of a, to find more deals like that, because it is, it was quite great.
Awesome. So the next natural question, Jacob, for you, and I've heard the same question for 12 years now. When you got into investing, how did you get the money? How did you get that first investor? What was the conversation like?
Yeah.
And what did the deal look like?
That's a good question. So it's actually funny. So like I was trying to sell I had a listing that I just gotten a pretty, like there was a pretty big issue at the house. So we found out about through multiple home inspections, and the seller was like, Jake, I need to sell right now. This was in Alexandria. And I was like, okay. Do you want a cash offer? And she was like, yeah, I just get me out of this place. I need to, she had life happening. So I was like, all right, well, I called up my trusty investor, one of my first guys. And I was like, here's the deal. I sold it to him. He went and he came to see it. And then he was like, all right, he's like, I'm not fully sold on it. He's like, I don't think it's a great deal at that price. And seller wasn't budging on her price. So I was like, what's it going to take for you to do this? And he was like, all right, I'll do it, but you're in it for your commission. And I was like a partner? And he was like, yeah, 50-50. And I was like, okay. So he became like my first investor. Like he's, he funded my first 2 flips. He funded my first new construction project. He's been a soundboard to bounce ideas off of for some of my other rental or investment opportunities. And then after, once you build up, he did not really have favorable interest rates or terms, quite frankly. But that's okay, because, when you're getting started, you kind of have to eat dirt when you get started to get yourself to level up. So, from there, I kind of had a track record, and I showed it to other hard money lenders and banks, and they're all like, all right, hey, here, you're good to go. If you want to buy anything, here's what our terms are. So now that I've done 2 deals with my hard money lender, we have a great relationship, and now we're starting to get in with Sandy Spring Bank and John Marshall Bank, and talking with them about getting like a guidance line of credit, so I can continue to grow that inside of the investing business.
So Jacob, one last question on this segment. So when you did the deal with this investor, what did the deal structure look like? A lot of folks are like, well, how can I get this person to partner on the deal or give me money for the deal? What did the deal structure look like?
Yeah, so the way it worked was it's a BRRRR deal. Okay, so we bought it for $325, and it's worth like $570, but at the time it was worth probably about $525. So it's about $200K in spread. So it's pretty big. It was a really good deal, but it needed a lot of work. And he was like, I don't have the time to manage this. I've got bigger projects. He's like, I'm going to put the cash in. Like I need to, it was like, it's the problem everybody has. It's just time. So I was like, all right, well, here's the deal. You put the cash up. I'll be in it for my commission. I'll contribute the 100% of the commission to you for closing costs. And I was like, but in turn, like I'll also fund half of the renovation cost out of my own pocket. You're going to fund the other half. And then when we refinance, I'll put myself on the mortgage through the refinance, and I'll rent the property for free and manage property management and all that good stuff in turn for 50% of the profit when we go to sell it. So that being said, it's a pretty great deal, because I was getting like an $8,000 commission or so. So I was like, all right, to get into a property, I conceded that. And then I spent another about $15,000 that I had saved up through, selling real estate on the renovation. And then I rented it out. I refinanced it. My investor got all of his cash back. And then I got all my cash back too. It was a really good deal. Rates were still pretty low. So we, locked in as like 3.8, and it's rented out. It's, paying the mortgage. Everybody we're both in it for nothing now. We have $200,000 in equity. So I'm a 50-50 partner with a rental property in Alexandria. For me putting in, what was it, like $23,000 or something like that, maybe 25 at the most. And now it's worth $100,000 in equity.
Oh,
incredible.
When we go to sell that like next year, I'll need to find another project or something to put that money into. But that's kind of, that's how I've structured it in the past. I've got most of those 7. It's like 5 of those 7 are right now are partnerships exactly the same as that.
When you're ready, make sure to go to investorlift.com for the best off-market deals.
he will be.
I will. Josh and I were talking about the other night. We were like, man, this investor lift thing's probably going to take off.
Yeah, it's blowing. We grew like over 500% this year. It's crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
So guys, I think the lesson here from Jacob is that if there's a will, there's a way. A lot of investors think, especially newer ones, that if you don't have the money, that it's not possible. If you want to do the deal, don't make money the excuse. If anyone's an example of that, I think Jacob is. Our next segment, we're going to be talking about some of the more creative things or analytical things that Jacob is familiar with that maybe a lot of our viewers are not. So, Robert, if you could play the next clip for us.
Absolutely. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. We'll roll a couple minutes of this.
Hey, what's up, guys? Jake Hamilton here with Keller Williams Metro Center. Today, we're going to talk about if a cost segregation study would be beneficial for you. First question most people are probably going to ask watching this video is, what is a cost segregation study and does it apply for me? Now, if you own a property that is a rental property, this applies to you. So it really only applies to our investor clients or the people that own a rental property that they, are renting out, have tenants in. Wouldn't apply for any of our developer or flipper clients, but it certainly applies to you if you have a rental property. Essentially, what a cost segregation study is it's an accelerated depreciation study. So 2019 tax code says that you're allowed to depreciate your property at 25 years. That doesn't mean the entire cost of the property. That means just the building costs. So if you buy a $100,000 building, say you have an $80,000 building cost and $20,000 for land, that's what you get to depreciate, the $80,000. With that being said, you get a depreciation.
All right, so there's a little teaser. You're gonna have to go to YouTube to watch the rest.
Yeah.
So Jacob, what is a cost seg study for those who are not familiar? And awesome video, awesome channel on YouTube, by the way. You're doing a great job with that.
Yes, honestly, it's probably one of the most powerful things for real estate investors, especially if you're like it's a really incredible tax tool, especially if you're like a real estate agent or you're classified by the IRS as a real estate professional. To give you an example, like I own a property, the one I was just speaking about, the owner financing one in Huntington, and I'm actually doing a cost segregation study on it right now. And it'll save me roughly about $75,000 on my taxes. But the way it works is when you think of a building, like if we go back, you've got $100,000 in building costs, and right now it's 25 or 27 and a half years that you get to depreciate through the IRS. So, $2,000 a year or so that you get to just write off. Straight line depreciation is what they call it. But if you dig into the nuts and bolts of the building and you depreciate your windows, or you depreciate your trim, or you depreciate your glass, or you depreciate your ceiling and your lights, they're all on different depreciation schedules. So like the lights are at like 7 years, and trim is at like 5 years, cabinet is at 5 years, flooring is at 7 or 15 years, something like that. But it's all segregated out because the IRS recognizes that electrical stuff might not last as long as structural. It might only last 15 years, whereas structural is going to last 27 and a half, right? So what you're doing when you're getting a cost segregation study done is you're hiring an engineering company to come in and segregate the costs of the building out. Because if you're taking just the building costs that your insurance company gives, or that the county assesses your property at, and that's what you're depreciating, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, because you need to go in, you need to show the IRS like, hey, sure, the assessed value has the building cost at this much, but here's what's inside of that building. Here's what the cost of the cabinets is. Here's what the cost of the trim is. Here's what the cost of the electrical and the plumbing and all this other cosmetic stuff. And then the IRS will let you depreciate on a 5, a 7, and a 15-year, as well as a 27.5-year schedule. So you got to really take a lot more depreciation expense. And on top of that, under the Trump administration, there was a law that was put in place that was called bonus depreciation. It was created so that real estate investors would have more money to pump into the housing market. Essentially, right now, the tax code is that, and I'm not a CPA, so this isn't tax advice, but right now, if I get a cost segregation study done and it shows that all my costs are, say, 70 grand, I get a $70,000 write-off rather than taking that 70 grand over the 5, 7, and 15-year schedules. So it's bonus because it's all written off right at once. It's a really powerful tax tool. I've done it a number of times on my rental properties. It's one of the reasons why I can lower my tax liability to nearly nothing at the end of the year.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
That's so impressive. Now, what's interesting is like we've had people on the show talk about cost seg studies, but it's always the commercial guys, right? Like Tim Bratz, for example, or Jason Yarusi. Like, these guys have talked about it, but they own 100, 200 unit buildings. What I love here is you're using the same strategies that the mega super Tim Bratz has got 350 million in his portfolio. So I'm like, okay, it makes sense, but it also makes sense even if you have a $250,000 place, maybe.
It makes sense. I would say all the way. Yeah, about 250 is probably the bare minimum. Otherwise, the cost of the study is probably not going to make sense for the.
What does it cost to get that done? And what do you think people save on average?
So
is there always an ROI, or is there some cases?
There's no point in doing it if there's not an ROI. It costs for like the duplexes that I have. They cost about $6,000 each for the study.
And what do you think? And you said you're going to save $75,000 in taxes.
Yeah, so I get to write off the $6,000 for the cost of the study, and then I get to write off about $75,000 from their findings.
Wow, straight to the bottom line.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful. And the thing is, so like the reason I said it's a really powerful tool for people who are classified at the IRS as real estate investors is because I'm going to take a $75,000 write off. That property only generates $24,000 a year in income.
Right.
So there's an additional $50,000. If you're not classified by the IRS as a real estate professional, then that $50,000 is then rolled over to the next year and the next year, which is fine. But for me, I'm classified as a real estate professional by the IRS, so that means that I got to take that $50,000 against my other ordinary income.
I love that.
Yeah.
And to be classified, you would need to have a realtor license, or is there any other?
You need to be able to prove to the IRS that you're, working in the real estate space. I think it's more than 30 hours a week.
Okay, so
you guys definitely apply.
Oh, so we technically could both, like Josh and I could technically, like even without a real estate license.
Correct. You don't need a real estate license for it. It's just showing that you work in the real estate space.
Awesome. That's an incredible tip. Now, you mentioned that, sometimes it doesn't make sense if you don't know that there's going to be ROI. What's the thought process of kind of determining, like, when you see a deal, what kind of signals do you see on a deal that like, hey, like for sure this one would be great for cost seg, and for sure this one, I'm not going to get an ROI. What do you look for?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go buy a deal just to do a cost seg study. I mean, right. I know there are big companies, like I'm sure Blackstone Group, these mega Wall Street hedge fund real estate investor companies do that. But I don't even like I have a spreadsheet, and when I go through my spreadsheet, that's the thing at the very bottom of how much tax savings I'm going to get off the property. So it's not something you should go out. You shouldn't go out and look for deals, I don't think, and be like, all right, I'm going to do a cost segregation study on this and save on my taxes, because you might end up buying a bad deal. Like, to get into a good deal, you need to know the market. You need to know you're buying it under market value, and you know what it can rent for. Like the tried and true stuff. This is the icing on the cake.
Makes sense.
Cool. So Jacob, recently you opened a Compass office in Old Town Alexandria. I think you were approached by the company to do this. Can you describe that next phase of your career?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. So I joined Compass back in July, and it was kind of funny because like I had been in conversations with them since probably 2019 or something like that. And I was at Keller Williams before and loved it there. I still love everybody at Keller Williams, and I had such a great experience working with them and being a partner with them. But it just became it became time for me to kind of level my business up on the marketing side of things. And with Compass, they said, hey, Jacob, like for your staff and everybody that works with you, we don't really have the space for you at our actual office. And, they helped me find a new space in Old Town, which I'm actually sitting in right now. And we, work with them on finding that new space and all that stuff for quite some time and building it out and, all that great stuff. They were a big, help with all that stuff. So, they're my new brokerage, newer brokerage, I guess you could say. It's been an absolute pleasure being a partner with them. I mean, they've been instrumental to the growth that I've had this year. For people that don't know, like my team, I guess you would say, it's myself. I handle all the listings and all the buyers, and I have a showing agent, Jessica. She shows all the houses to all our buyers and all our leads that come through on our listings. And then I have a director of operations who helps coordinate contractors and all that stuff for our listing. His name's Cooper. And then I have another assistant who does all my paperwork and transaction coordination and all that good stuff. And her name is Mia. So it's just the four of us right now. I think we'll probably stay pretty lean and mean and pretty small for the foreseeable future. I could maybe see myself adding another agent. I don't know if I'm one of those type of agents that wants to grow some big mega team at all. I don't see a lot of profitability with doing something like that, quite honestly. So we'll probably stay pretty lean and continue to grow the investing side of the business a little bit more.
I love it. Now, what's crazy is you're 21, right?
Yep.
So, like, when I hear that, I'm just like, oh, man, you're like so far ahead of the curve. Like, where are you going to be when you're 30? Like, what do you have a plan, like a 10-year vision of where you want to go with this?
That's a crazy question because it's like, it's crazy to think about because, like, you think you're like, okay, I'm setting my 2021 goals right now, and I'm going to sell 100 houses next year. That's the goal. So just myself, Jessica, Cooper, and Mia, we're going to do 100 transactions. We've mapped it out. We're going to do it with your help. So, that being said,
investorlift.com.
Yeah, exactly. And the help of your referrals. But anyways, 9 years from now, I mean, it's crazy to think about, but I'd like to, and still in some way or another, be selling a high level of real estate. Because the thing about selling real estate is that it keeps me in the market. Like, there's a reason these builders still work with me and they don't just pay some flat fee like MLS person to put it in the MLS for them. Yeah. And it's because they can look at the comps on Redfin and yada, 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 and they know the market, they study it, but like they don't know it as well as I do. And that's why they're paying me a commission to sell their properties to make sure they sell it for top dollar, right? So that being said, what's interesting about it is that, like, if I still want to be a real estate agent 10 years from now, right now at least, I still want to be a real estate agent 20 years from now because it keeps me on top of the market, which will in turn keep me getting into really lucrative investment deals. So I would say 10 years from now, I'd like to be building, maybe 25 or 30 houses a year and then brokering somewhere around, 40 or 50 units. And then, be rolling those profits from both of those businesses into multifamily and retail investing and stuff like that.
Next Tim Bratz right here.
Maybe a younger version of it.
Yeah, get it faster.
So Jacob, what have been the challenges in growing your team? I know you've talked to me about a little bit of it, but what would you say the audience has been the biggest struggle for you?
I would say, so like, here's the thing, like real estate agents, with most real estate agents, what happens is you get into the business and you start on a team. So you're working under another agent and you're selling houses and they're getting half your commission. And I was doing that for 18 months. My first 18 months in the business was with a team. And it was the best. Paying them the 50% of my commission was the best investment I ever made in my entire life because I learned, I was paying for an education. So like, I started as that and I moved on to being on my own. And when I was on my own, that's when all the growing pains started happening because I was like, wow, I really don't have this shit figured out like they did. I may learn a lot, but I don't know anything. So finding really good help. And what I'll say, like, my office would always tell me like, oh, Jake, you should hire new agents and train them. You can make so much money. And I was like, why would I do that when I don't have any of this figured out yet on the back end? Like I needed to build out systems and processes with my assistant. So I burned through my first assistant, lasted like 2 weeks, and I let her go. I hired her because she was very pretty, and
Classic 21-year-old move.
I was 19. This was a true story.
19, wow.
Yeah, so like she was really, she's gorgeous. So like I'd go through the office and like some of the guys would be like, "Hey, assistant," I'd be like, "Yeah." So I had her for like 3 weeks. She was slowing me down more than she was speeding me up. So I let her go, and I hired another assistant who was with me for about 18 months. And I just let her go because she was slowing us down more than speeding us up. She's in a new position now, which I'm super happy for her for. But I just hired a director of operations, and I had my TC for the past about almost a year. And right now I'm very staff heavy because what most real estate agents really need to realize is that staff are cheaper than agents. So like you can handle more transactions if you have the right systems, processes, and staff in place. Like for me, like this year I'll sell 38 or 40 houses. No, it's like, 30 houses, 32 or 33 houses just on the buy side. Half of those properties I never even went to because my showing agent did all the inspections and showed all the property for me. So like I integrated that piece of leverage into my business. And then I hired a TC who, she's virtual and she's $18,000 a year. She handles all my paperwork. She's super proficient with it. It took me about 3 months to really train her, but now she's really on top of all the transaction coordination stuff. And then I hired a director of operations and spent a lot of time I'm still spending a lot of time working with him and training him on getting him up to speed. Then he can take over the listing coordination process for me, which is, the process of booking photographers, scheduling contractors to go and repair the property, staging, all that good stuff. All the stuff that is not a money generating activity, he's taking off my plate, which is in turn, each one of these people, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year people, that's still cheaper than having an agent only, when you're only collecting 50% of their commission. If I can sell 4 houses and I cover their salary, what I need to do is figure out a way for them to be able to take enough time off my plate where I have the time to go and sell 8 or 10 more properties, because then my business becomes a lot more profitable versus, having one assistant who just does everything and then I do the rest. And then I have other agents where I collect 50% of their commission and the profitability is not as high. I don't know if that makes so much sense, but
yeah,
hopefully
I think it's very similar to, a lot of the stuff that we go through in the wholesale and flip space. A lot of businesses, when they first get started, they see the flipper flop on HGTV and all these shows, and they're like, man, I want to flip. Like, that's where the money is. And what they don't realize is you need a director of operations, you need transaction coordinators, you need crews, you need marketing.
You have to go step by step.
Yeah, you need like this huge team. You're going to have super high overhead. And then really what happens, the real pros actually transition out of flipping to wholesaling, and that becomes the majority of the revenue, because what they realize over the years is the margins are so much higher in wholesaling.
Exactly.
So much less people needed and higher cash conversion cycles. We just went through this transition with Josh's company. Josh, you were super construction heavy. Now you're super wholesale heavy. We did it actually at Tarek Buys Houses with Tarek El Moussa. He was super flip heavy. Now he's starting to wholesale a lot. He went from 4 months ago, $40,000, just one assignment fee that month, to then the next month, $200,000, then $500,000, then $1 million, then $1 million plus. So it's interesting. We're seeing the same kind of thing in the investing space. Is like you want
it's the same exact business. Like being a real estate agent's about 50 or 60% margin for an agent, maybe like myself or like a really small team. And the same goes for wholesaler. I would say it's probably about 50% margin, which is a lot better than flipping, because like in our market, I sold 2 flips this year where I told the builder not to buy them because he wouldn't make any money. And one of them, he's losing 75 grand. The other one, he's losing 30 grand. Our market here in Nova, like flip wise, you got to be really robbing somebody to make good money on it. That's why the new construction space here is so big, because I can make 200 grand on a house. I can make 500 grand or $1 million on a house in McLean or North Arlington. And here on a flip, if I flip a house in Alexandria, I'm lucky to make $20,000 or $30,000. So like, what's the point of going through all that headache to make 20 or 30 grand when I could just sell you an $800,000 house or get a $20,000 or $30,000 assignment fee?
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't. Here it doesn't make a lot of sense, but in Baltimore, it's like, okay, yeah, you can make 30 grand on a house that you only invested $100,000 into.
Less risk.
We got a question coming in. What's the split with the showing agent? Pedro Pacar is asking you.
Wish I could disclose.
We had another comment that came in here that I thought was pretty funny. This is how deals are done, not that Kool-Aid BS here at the clubs.
So true. And Josh, I love you to death, but like, there's a reason I don't show a lot of face at these DMV Dealmaker things or any investment clubs, because like, a lot of the stuff that's talked about, I'm just like, I could never see myself doing that. And because whoever commented that is completely right. It's like, yeah, this is legitimately, this is real. This is how things are done. This is not, it's not like how some people paint a picture of how they structure things or however it is.
Yeah. Unless you go to a club that is organized by Josh Cohen, of course. I remember actually that's where I met you, was actually at that Italian meetup. I think I spoke that night, and I think you spoke as well, didn't you?
I may have. I've spoken at 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. That one was good. But, you had some real people that were just speaking exactly how things actually go, not like, fluffy.
There's some people that are just like, oh, well, you can do there's no wrong way to invest in real estate. Don't get me wrong. But there's things that happen more often than not. Right. Yeah. Like the way I structured my deal, that I bet you could go to 100 real estate investors who are legitimate real estate investors, people who do it on a consistent basis. And they would say, oh, I've seen that type of structure before.
Yeah.
And you could go to that same investor and you could say, hey, what do you think about this super complicated leaseback arrangement, all this good stuff? They'd be like, yeah, I probably wouldn't do that. But the thing about my structure with these deals is it makes sense for me because it's not a lot of cash in, and it makes sense for the original investor because it's he's really the one in the entire situation who's winning the most, right? And you have to kind of eat dirt for a couple of years, like I said, do a couple of those deals, make some money, and then go out on your own.
That makes sense. I mean, Jacob, you're probably in the 1% of all realtors, if not the 0.1%. What do you think has been the secret to your success? Like, what could other folks do that, they could get to where you are right now?
Well, it's hard because, like, I keep looking at myself. I'm like, wow, I could do so much better. I can keep climbing. But I would say it's really like real estate is what you put into it, no matter what side of it you're in. If you're in property management, or if you're a builder, if you're a contractor, or if you're a real estate agent, you're a wholesaler, or whatever it is, like it's exactly what you put into it. And, I'm not saying that there's plenty of people in our space that work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, but you got to make sure you're doing the right activities because you can work 60 or 70, 80 hours a week and think you're grinding, but you're really not. So I would think it's just putting the right time into it. So doing, you as an agent putting 80 hours a week into previewing properties is not going to make you money. You might know the market really well, but you need to call some people and talk to them about the property that you previewed and see if you can sell it. So like I would say it's all about the time and energy and effort that you put into it, but it's also about the activities that you're doing that are going to get you there.
So I hear you talking about like revenue generating activities. So how does your day break down in terms of that?
That's a great question. I mean, like my day has changed a lot since I first got started, but now I usually get to the office around like 7:15, 7:30. And immediately the first thing I do when I get here is, I'll get my coffee and whatnot and get going, but I'll write down a list of things that I need to do. And part of that is writing down the people I need to call for prospecting and whatnot and follow up and all that good stuff. But then on top of those, all the other things I need to do to make sure the business is still running efficiently. About half of my day is spent on money generating activities, which is prospecting. So calling builders about lots that I've found, or going on the MLS, finding an as-is deal, and then calling through my list of investors and figuring out which one of them wants to buy it, or calling some past clients just to check in and see how they're doing and ask them if they know of anybody that I can help by, well, like I said, a lot of my business is based on referral. And at the same time, reaching out to people that I don't know and saying, hey, would you consider selling your property and all that good stuff? Was this at Josh's event? Jacob was the one that told me everyday prospecting is a day, 90 days from now you don't get paid. That's exactly right. So like if you go slack out on your lead generation, 90 days from now, you're not going to be selling a house. So like you got to be putting that time, energy, and effort in to reaching out to people, proactively talking to them about buying and selling real estate, which is a majority of how my day is broken out.
So I hear you saying 50% of your day is reaching out to people.
Yeah, from about 8 o'clock till right at 12 is actively trying to either sell my listings or find buyers for my listings or find new listings and new buyers to work with.
Yeah.
And how many calls would you say you're making during that time frame?
I mean, it really varies because some days I'm only calling past clients. So it might only be 25 or 30 people. Some days I'm calling 200 or 300 absentee owners to see if I can find a lot for a builder because inventory is really short. So I would say on an average week, just myself, probably 800-ish calls.
Wow. I think it's smart doing it in the morning too. Demetrius says 80-20, 100%. It's so true. I remember one of my first jobs, I was working in wealth management, and our job was to like get CEOs and high net worth individuals on the phone and try to get them to invest with the firm. And I was working part-time while I was in school. So a lot of other people were working like full-time internships. And I was only working maybe 2 hours per day, but I was able to outproduce a lot of those people that were doing full-time internships because everyone else would come into the office at 9 or 10 o'clock. And I would come in at like 7:30 because I knew like the 7:30 to 9 o'clock window is where you get CEOs on the phone.
Yep. Because they're all there. They're all at the office already, just like you. And they're like, who's calling me?
Ready for the day.
Do you know why I get so high? Because nobody's bothering me. Nobody's calling me until 10:30.
Yeah, and then you're booked. Like my phone rings 50 times a day, and I'm on calls all day long, and probably I maybe answer 2 or 3 of them if their number's saved in my phone. So if you're in real estate and you're trying to work with high net worth individuals, trying to get these big listings, it's probably the exact same thing. You got to get in there early, do your prospecting first thing in the morning, 80-20. You just get in early, get it done early, and you're going to have way bigger results. Like Demetrius said, 80-20, just focus on where you can get the most leverage.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think I already know the answer to this, but I want to ask you this question. What do you think your super ninja skill is? Like, what do you bring to this business that it's your superpower?
I think it's creative problem solving. And like, I don't know if that's what you were thinking too, but I've been put into a lot of positions in my career where like we need to think out of the box on how to fix a problem, or it might not even be like, or maybe it's just coordinating something that is, to like projects and all that stuff. Like for example, earlier this year, I had a listing that had so much termite damage on the sill plates that we had to literally rent 2 cranes to come and lift the house up to install new sill plates on the home.
Wow.
I got another listing out of it because I was standing outside of the house when it was happening, and a neighbor was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "I'm the real estate agent. I hired the 2 cranes to come and lift the house up to repair it for a home inspection."
Going above and beyond.
And they're like, "That is not something you see a real estate agent doing every day. We're actually going to be selling." And I was like, "All right, well, let's stay in touch." But I would definitely say creative problem solving. Like there's been plenty of times where even Josh has like had other agents working on his listing because maybe they sold him the deal or whatever it was. And that agent just, didn't perform. And I had to come in and clean the mess up and creatively think about how are we going to really get this to the finish line and get it actually sold. So the builder can make money, the agent can sell it, and everybody can be happy.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Another question from Demetrius.
I would say what would you say your income producing activity is most important task for anybody trying to grow? I would say if you're just to grow as quickly as possible, I would say you need to show up every single day, do one activity consistently. And if I were to choose an activity, I think it would probably be hitting the phones or going and knocking on doors.
And would you have any recommendations like who they should call?
I think, the people I built my business off of were like the expired and canceled listings, which work for both investors and real estate agents. And on top of that, maybe calling people who are pre-foreclosure, people who are in probate. Josh, you could probably sprinkle some advice on who else to call, like calling people who don't, maybe perhaps people who haven't paid their utility bill in 2 months, that type of stuff, to find people who are in distress, things like that. Or maybe even narrow it down more. You don't need to call every absentee owner in all of Northern Virginia. You could call only the ones that have owned their properties for 10 plus years because it's, or you could call people who have, liens on their home, mechanics liens, stuff like that. And just there's a plethora of data out there for you to be able to, call and whatnot to find people, but you need to do it consistently. You need to go every single morning. You got to call people for 2 or 3 hours to speak to them about, hey, like, what can I do to help you? Or can I buy a property, or can I help you sell it? Whatever it is.
Makes sense.
Great tips. So I got a question for you. So my younger sister, actually, she's a year younger than you. She's 20 years old, and she's wanting to get into the real estate space. She started a job actually in Vancouver working for the Faith Wilson Group. I think Faith Wilson is also with Keller Williams. Keller Williams or Sotheby's. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, she's gained some experience under her belt. It's great team. They're selling all the multi-million-dollar homes in Vancouver. For people like my sister who are maybe 19, 20 years old and are watching this and want to get to where you are, what do you think are the top 3 things that they should focus on to get from where they are just starting off in real estate to being super successful like you?
I would say you got to know your stuff. You got to be like I said at the beginning of this, the top 3 things to get to where, I might consider myself would be just knowing the market, knowing that you can provide value, and find the value that you can provide to, if you're a real estate agent, to your clients, if you're a real estate investor, to the value that you can provide to your sellers. And then the third thing I would say is just be consistent with what you do, because there's no right and wrong way to invest in real estate. And there's no right and wrong way to sell or find a client for being a real estate agent. So figure out what works for you, because what worked for me in the beginning was calling expireds and for sale by owners. And now I'm later on in the business, and that's starting to be like, it's kind of more of a chore than it once was, right? Now it's becoming, okay, my time should be more spent calling the 150 people that I've sold property to already and seeing if they have more people they can introduce me to that I could help out, or calling a new investor up and presenting a new deal to him, or whatever it may be. That's becoming my business. So that's what works for me. But everybody's got to go out there and they got to find, okay, hey, this is what exactly works perfectly for me. This might, and you got to find that thing and then do it consistently. You got to find out where you can add value to your client or the seller that you're working with. And the first thing, you really have to know the market like the back of your hand. So,
great tips.
The questions are pouring in, Robert. Gia wants to know, what's up, Gia? Thanks for joining us on Dealmaker Nation on a Saturday morning. Are there systems and software you would suggest for newbies?
So the software I use now is very complex and very heavily built out. It's called Rike, WRIKE. We use it for transaction management, construction management, event planning, everything under the sun. For newbies, I used Trello in the beginning, and I grew out of it. Trello is perfect because if you're a real estate investor or wholesaler, then you can go in there and write all the steps for this transaction to go through, or all the steps that you need to take in order to get a contract signed by a seller. And you can make it onto a board. You can copy that board and then rename it as the property address. And it's pretty self-explanatory.
How are you tracking all these calls that you're making, Jacob, to all these different sellers and buyers? What system are you using?
We use a pretty comprehensive CRM.
From Compass or your own?
Yeah. So Compass provides us with a very nice, innovative CRM that we use. Honestly, it's changed my business. It's one of the big reasons why I moved over here.
What does it do that your other CRMs weren't?
The CRM you use is the CRM you love. So it's not necessarily like people ask me all the time, what CRM do you use? And I think that question is really, I think it's almost like I don't even think it's a very good question to ask, because it's hard to say, because almost every question is a good question to ask. But like at the end of the day, they ask, hey Jake, what CRM do you use? And it's like, I could use an Excel spreadsheet.
Doesn't matter. They're all the same thing. It's information system.
Like I could use a Post-it notes, which I did at one point for a very long time. My CRM was Post-it notes. I had a paper filing cabinet with a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, where I would talk to a lead, print out their information, and put them into the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it was, and it was for the whole month.
Yeah.
That was my CRM for like 18 months or 2 years almost, and it worked.
But you're saying the Compass CRM changed your business? Like, are there certain features that it has that you didn't have
There's
previously?
no features at all that are different than, say, Contactually or Follow Up Boss or Drive or whatever else there is out there, or Salesforce. There's nothing that's super special about it, except for the fact that I'm in the Compass software every single day, looking at the market and doing other tasks that I need to do within there to just run my business. So it became the tech software that I needed for everything. So the CRM was just the icing on the cake.
Yeah. People always ask me this question too, because I'm doing software consulting for a lot of businesses, and they're like, "Oh, which CRM should I use?" I'm like, okay, look, first of all, they all do the same thing. My one recommendation is always go with a major one, like go with something like Salesforce or something, because it's more flexible. Okay. I really like Salesforce and ActiveCampaign are two of my favorites. And the reason why is like there's a lot of like plugins and connections you can do with those. You plug Zapier into any of those, and there's like a million different things you can do, right?
Zapier is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely incredible. Learn Zapier and then find a CRM that you can plug Zapier into, because what you're going to do is when you first get your CRM out of the box, there's just going to be base functionality. And then you're going to want to add features. You're going to add a dialer. You're going to want to add texting. You're going to want to add deal management, reporting. So, but you're not going to do that all at once, right? You're not going to even know what you need to do all at once. So just start with anything and just make sure you're going with something that's like a major name brand that there'll be a lot of plugins and you can interact with, and you'll do fine.
I agree. I mean, like, and there's some like ActiveCampaign and Salesforce are super highly complex CRMs. So like there's Follow Up Boss or Contactually, which are really easy to use, or Lion's Desk. So they're all super easy to use. And then, Salesforce and ActiveCampaign, like you can really connect those into Facebook, Gmail, Mojo, whatever you're using to help it, to just help systemize everything else within your business.
So Jacob, how can folks get in touch with you if they want to reach out, or if they have questions about real estate, buying, selling, investing? What's the best way to get at you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. It's Jacob Hamiltons. So S at the end of it, it's plural. So there was another at Jacob Hamilton who got what should be my username. But follow me on Instagram, send me a DM there, or add me as a friend on Facebook and send me a DM there. Or you can even give me a call or send me an email. I think, Josh, maybe you could put my information in the chat.
Jacob at jacobhamilton.com.
At jacobshamilton.com. There's another Jacob Hamilton that got my URL. There's somebody out there to get me with this type of stuff.
And our final thing today, Jacob, closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts. That's a great question, Josh. Probably one of the best you've asked today.
Very specific.
Just stick with it. This is a beautiful business. It's a ton of fun, and it's a great space to be in. There's a lot of great people here. There's a lot of bad people in the business too that you're going to run into, and it's just do right by others when it comes to doing these deals, and keep working on it. Be consistent with what you're doing, and the success will come.
Awesome.
Great advice. Robert with Investor with Man. Sir Robert, what can you take away from today? Like, I know you have some big ones.
I think just consistency. I think that's really a key thing. You hear that from a lot of really successful people that get really successful very fast. A lot of times when you talk to people that are successful, it almost seems like, oh, this person had instant success, but really it's not instant success. It's just the daily habits, right? Josh and I, by the way, we're actually starting something today, the 75 hard. Have you heard about the 75 hard?
I haven't.
You gotta look it up. So it's a challenge to teach and improve your self-discipline, because self-discipline is it's like a muscle. You got to work it, right? So it's 75 days, and you have to do, I think, 4 or 5 things each day. You have to drink a gallon of water, work out twice a day for 45 minutes each time, every day. One of those workouts has to be outside. You got to read 10 pages of a nonfiction book. Pick a diet and stick to it. I'm going mostly vegan, except for bread and sauces, because that's impossible. And what else? Am I missing anything else, Josh?
That's it, man.
That's insane. You guys
We got inspired, by the way, by Mark Evans, Jason Rushi. Those guys were both on the show. They both did it. Their transformations were absolutely incredible. But Mark Evans got absolutely jacked. But I've talked to a lot of business owners that have done it. The reason why I want to do it is they're like, dude, I did it. It was the hardest thing I ever did. I had to restart 16 different times. But when I finally got through it, my business grew 30%. Because it was just it's like if you can have the discipline to do all of that every single day, if you miss one thing one day, you got to restart from zero.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But if you have the discipline to do that, then all the small stuff and that
everything else becomes easy.
Exactly. And then at the end of the 75 days, now you're like, okay, I can do anything. I got discipline. So day one today, Josh.
Day one. I'm on day 2 right now. This is day 2. Let's go, man.
Did you start early?
I started early.
Oh, man.
Guys, if you've been tuning in, thanks so much for joining us on the Saturday edition of Dealmaker Nation. We're going to have, Robert and I have a surprise guest in 2 weeks. It's going to blow you out for the rest of the year. He's going to change your business for 2021. You'll be shocked who we have. And 3 things, Jacob, if you're shy to reach out to him, get at this guy. He's a wizard of real estate. He's young, ambitious, but he's amazing. So reach out to him. If you're shy, don't be shy. 3 things that I have today, and these are the 3 things that I see. And a lot of folks are talking to this, especially with COVID going on. Gurus, you can call them furus, are going belly up right now or have already gone belly up. And why? Because they don't know their numbers. Their overhead is way too high. You see all the glam and the glitz, but their overhead is killing them. Jacob, in my opinion, is super successful because, number 1, he really knows his numbers. And you heard that today. He operates a really lean company with, high profit margin. Number 2, he does what he's great at. He doesn't get distracted with all these other things. And I've witnessed that personally. You're not going to see Jacob out in the field building. He does his thing and he stays in his lane. He's never going to swing a hammer. He stays in his lane. So that's number 2. He knows what he's really good at, and that's all that he does. And number 3, he's really efficient with his time. You heard him talk about spending 50% of the day strictly doing revenue generating activities. So if you can do those 3 things that Jacob has already sort of mastered, you guys are going to crush it in 2021. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Robert, for co-hosting, and thanks for being with us on this Saturday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
We'll see you guys in 2 weeks, and watch our feed because our next speaker to close out the year is going to blow your mind.
Awesome. Jacob, thanks so much. It's been great. We got to have you on again 6 months or a year and see where you're at and give us a little bit of
status report. Yeah, we'll have to figure it out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for watching. Guys, thanks for joining us on the live show tonight. If you're on Facebook, make sure to join our Facebook group. It's facebook.com/DealmakerNation. Tons of great content in that group, tons of great people. Make sure you're joining the community, join the network, and learning from other like-minded entrepreneurs. Also on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel. You can find it at youtube.com/DealmakerNation. Thanks for joining us on the show tonight.